Perfect. Maria, good morning everybody and welcome to Council meeting for 30th of April 2025. Lindy is going to start us off with a karakia.
Ki taua mai I mana, ki taua mai I ngaro, ki taua mai I roto, ki taua mai I waho. Ki tai ai, ki mari tū, ki mai ora, ki tu taua, ka mai I, hui I, taiki I. Comes from the farm below the bed and from the enjoyment, vitality and well-being for this big community.
Thank you very much, Linley. We have no apologies today.
For your early departure.
Sorry?
For your early departure.
Yes, I will be an apology for an early departure today, which will be about 3 o'clock. And we have Neil joining us online today. I'm happy to move that the apology for early departure be accepted. Thank you, Sarah. Second that. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Now we are moving into our public forum. Mike, Alex, Tom, I assume, welcome.
Thank you.
Wherever you like, and Mike and Alex can join you at the table if they wish. You're welcome to sit or stand or do a dance, whatever you feel like. You've got 5 minutes and then there may be a question or two.
Thank you. And good morning to you all. I'm going to read some notes because it's easier for me. My name is Don Sparks and I've been asked by the applicants to speak on their behalf. I've been involved with them on this matter since June last year. Early this week, we emailed Mr. Kelly and all the councillors with some comments and a copy of the lessee's application. Since then, the staff have notified us that the lessee's application is now scheduled for discussion today. It is important to say that Alex and Stevie do not expect any favours or that council will sell this land for any less than market value. Now, we do expect to be treated in a fair and proper way, as we all do. Brief summary of the application is that some of the land will be retained by council, including approximately 1 hectare of premium land adjoining the airport hangar precinct. A further 1.7 hectares of steeper face, which includes the existing bike and walking tracks through the property that have been developed and used by the public. The applicants would purchase the balance of the land of approximately 4.1 hectares with the improvements on it. The best method to determine values is by valuation, and it's important that valuers for both sides do the calculations on the same basis. For example, they need to be aware that this is a perpetually renewable lease, and because of this, the lessee's interest calculations need to apply. They need to know that they're valuing the unimproved land value only, as the lessees own all the improvements on the property. That is, the land in its native state, excluding things such as entrance development, fencing, landscaping, services such as water supply, power, and phone supply. The applicants have already paid for these improvements when they purchased the property. There will be other issues also that need to be agreed upon before valuations are requested. We believe it is important that this proposal needs to proceed for the benefit of both parties. Under leasehold tenure, the applicants are not able to make the best possible use of the land, and the return this lease provides is clearly not adequate for the people of the district. And really finally, I would like to make two requests. One is that the applicants, Mike Doreen and myself, are able to attend and speak at the private section of the meeting today. This matter is important to the council. However, the decisions made today by the council will have a major impact on the future of the assembly. Also, we ask that one or two councillors who are familiar with property transactions be allowed to attend meetings between council staff, the applicants, Mike Doreen and myself. And we see this would act as a good bridge between the applicants and the council staff. So we thank you for the opportunity to speak, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Did either of you want to make any comments, Alex or Mike?
No, from my point of view, it's just important that when it comes to doing the valuation, that they value the right item. And it's quite clear that the values that it's the land excluding improvements that's valued. You know, most valuations, if you just get a market valuation, they'll go around and use comparable sales of blocks. And most of those blocks will have services and everything. And so this block is going to be valued for what it is, which is land excluding improvements.
Including the substantial improvements you've both made with the chainsaw. Any questions? No? Perfect. We will be discussing that this afternoon. Unfortunately, it is in a public excluded session, which does not enable the three of you to attend, but this council is committed, both at this table and amongst the staff, to ongoing negotiations in a way that is beneficial for all parties. Legally, we can't look to sell the land for less than it is worth if you're looking to freehold the lease, but that is certainly something that will be worked through in a fair and proper manner. So yeah, you certainly can have our assurance on that.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Right. The minutes from our previous meeting on the 4th of April begin on page 7. Any questions or comments about those minutes? Someone happy to move them? Thank you, Ian. Seconded. Thank you, Lindley. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Declarations of interest begin on page 10. Please remember to update those regularly and step aside from anything that you might have a real or perceived conflict with. Does anybody have any conflicts for today that they want to cover off or amendments to be made? No. Perfect, thank you. And we now move to our community board chair update from Chair Jaden Crom, Vincent Community Board.
Awesome. Paulina, members of the VCB have been busy over the past few months engaging with the community on the long-term plan. This has included the information sessions at Dunstan High School, the Ormco Rugby Club rooms, and Alex and Clyde libraries, as well as fielding questions from the public on the key topics and a number of other issues and concerns. As submissions are still open, the VCB is yet to decide on what our submission will look like. But I'll be here during the hearing and deliberations to share with you all the views of the board and the community. I look forward to doing that in 3 weeks' time. So in some non-LTP news, VCB is pleased to see a plan is in place to deal with the freezing pipe issue in Rupa, and have been impressed by the speed that this has been dealt with and from communication with council staff. Work continues to progress on the Kaimana High Riverside Park, and the plaza will hopefully be opening soon as part of the stage of growth with river access coming in the near future. I'd also like to note that by using this name, we're celebrating the partnership and history of this area for both Māori and Māori. which was something that I think we really celebrated at our meeting, and that name was chosen. Been a while since I've been here, so I think it was before Christmas. So since then, there's also been a Super Smash Cricket with another successful year and an amazing opportunity for advertising for this area, with viewership reaching 50 to 70,000 people across 6 different countries. And the VCB was very happy yesterday to provide more support for everyone so that for this coming year. We've heard concerns from the public on the state of the entryway to town next to the no parking development. I can report that we are actively working with staff to find a suitable solution for this, namely the tree stumps, and we'll hopefully have more to say on that soon. Yesterday, the board heard from submitters on the Lower Manabura Reserve Management Plan draft. We were very impressed to have received 72 submissions on this, given the priority of the LTP consultation happening at the same time. And I'd again like to thank all those that submitted on that. I was really impressed with that number. Yesterday, we also approved a promotions grant from the Boston Festival for the next financial year, subject to the approval of the LTP. Well, we're yet to make a position, take a position on this. I wanted to give each of you plenty of notice that the Boston Festival is requesting a move from being in the grants to becoming a line item in the LTP. The conversations with them will continue over the coming weeks before we come back to you guys with that one. And since I was last here, the VCB held its February meeting in the Old Vincent County Council building in Hyde. We had a really good turnout for that, and I hope to see the VCB continue to go out into our smaller communities in the years to come. Overall, it's been a busy few months, and I'm proud of the time and effort being put in by members of the VCB during this LTP process, showing that even with changes ahead, we're an important part of the local government system and play a vital role in representing the voices of multiple unique communities across the Vincent community.
Thank you very much, Jen. Has anybody got any questions or comments for Jen on what the VCB has been up to? It was really neat heading to Clyde and also out to Umiko for the meetings. And having different people turn up that we don't usually get was really, I think, a worthwhile exercise.
Just James, just to catch on, and obviously I was at the meeting, but I think for everyone to hear, it would be really good to expand it just slightly on those submissions for the Lord and how those groups are all working together. And it was very constructive. So I don't know anything I did.
Yeah, whether it was walking trails, cycling trails, we even had the submitter who had created maps showing where the headroad cycling trails. It's quite cool. And we had 2 people come in to talk about horse riding and having access to places for that. But well, it's just good to see you get all these different activities, but they're all working together to try to make it a great space for the whole community.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Planning and regulatory, I would usually hand over to Neil, but since he's online and I don't want to drop Ian in it at the very last moment, I'll just cover this one up for you. Welcome, Alex, please, for the Class 4 gambling and board venue policy, and Dylan.
Okay, is here. This is my
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll keep you posted.
This meeting today is a hybrid hearing meeting, so you'll hear from us twice. The moment we'll give you the report before you hear from the oral submissions, and then we'll return and we'll give you the speed minutes for the meeting version. So this was a review that had quite a heavy level of pre-engagement in addition to the consultation itself. Throughout the review process, we reached out and met with Monica Timlo of the Whatuara Southern, Christy Kay, Problem Gambling Foundation, Ben Hodges and Joe Salisbury of the New Zealand Community Trust, and Jared True of True Legal, who is on the South of Gaming Societies. The consultation itself used the special consultative procedure. Advertising was funded with the psychoactive substances policy and the alcohol restrictions in public places bylaw to reduce the associated marketing costs. In the week prior to that consultation opening, we reached out by email to the Alexandria District Club, Cromwell Town and Country Club, Aotearoa Gaming Trust, Pub Charity Limited, New Zealand Police, and Te Raukaha, and staff attended both the Alexandria Council of Social Services and Cromwell Collective. The consultation results we have are tied, and we've got 11 votes by the way. And across all 3 consultations, we had 9 submitters who indicated they wish to speak, and 7 are scheduled to do so. 6 of those submitters are speaking to this item, and of those submitters, 4 will speak to gambling only, and then 2 will speak to all 3 of those bundled items together. Where there's no comments that came in relating to the board menu aspect, but it was pretty solely focused on Class 4 gambling and submission results. And we'll now hear from our first submitter. Hopefully.
Thank you.
Are we ready?
He's online, ready to go. Jared. Jared True, you are up first if you able to hear us.
Hello, good morning.
Perfect, we can hear you.
Yep. Cool. I've got a presentation which I understand that staff are going to load up and be able to flip through.
Wonderful. Wayne will let you know when that's ready to go.
Thank you.
There's no money. Yeah.
Right. We can see your presentation. Hopefully you can as well.
Can you see that, Jared?
That's just coming through now. That's brilliant. Thank you. So I'm Jared True. I represent the Gaming Machine Association of New Zealand. That represents the vast majority of our venues and gaming societies throughout the country. We're asking you to retain your current policy, the current policy that allows new venues and new machines, and your current policy which sensibly allows venues to relocate. The existing policy is perfectly fine, it's perfectly reasonable, and importantly, there's been no new evidence or no new concerns since the policy was last adopted over the last 3 or 4 years that would justify a significant policy change, which is what is recommended, which was the removal of the relocation provision and going from a sensible balance policy to the most restrictive policy you could possibly adopt, which is a sinking-lid policy with no relocation. So on the next slide, I've just detailed how your current policy is working. Under the current policy, machines have declined considerably. In 2015, you had 14 gaming venues. Now in 2025, you only have a mere 9 venues. In the next slide, I note that the problem gambling rate in New Zealand is extremely low, that the national problem gambling rate for adult New Zealanders is only 0.2% of the adult population, extremely low by national standards. There is no link between gaming machine numbers and problem gambling rates. Over the last 10 years, we've lost a quarter of our machines, over 4,500 machines have gone. However, during that same period of time, that same decade, the problem gambling rate has remained the same. It's remained static. Next slide, I just detail the benefits that come from having the machines locally. And the machines, of course, generate extremely valuable funding for local community groups. The funding's about $1.3 million every year in local grants. In addition to that, there's regional and national grants that also have a local benefit. And importantly, in addition to the $1.3 million figure, you have 2 of your 9 venues are club venues, and they retain all the game machine proceeds from their machines and use them to benefit the members of their club, the very same people that play the machines. So all of that money in those club venues remains locally and has a local benefit, although it's not reflected in that $1.3 million grant figure. Next slide details the benefit that comes from the machines from player entertainment. People enjoy gambling. It's a form of entertainment, a lawful form of entertainment, and 69.3% of New Zealand adults gamble at least once a year. In the next slide, I talk about the benefits that come in from having a relocation provision. Venues should be free to be able to move to lower deprivation areas or to move away from residential areas or sensitive sites. That's why we have relocation provisions. And importantly, when venues have relocated, they tend to move to newer, smaller, modern premises, and we consider that to be entirely appropriate and to be positive. On the next slide, there's two photos of the very first venue that relocated under a relocation policy. This is the Te Rapa Tavern in Hamilton. Once the relocation provisions were enacted into law, this venue here was able to relocate. It was a rundown venue, rough and tumble venue, very old school venue. That was able to relocate and retain its 18 machines. That made it viable, as you can see for the next two slides, what the new venue looked like. A nice new modern venue, a nice new attractive offering both externally and externally. So that's the sort of thing that can be facilitated when you allow venues to relocate to new modern attractive premises. The next slide, I also talk about the health and safety issues of enabling venues to relocate. We do have venues that need to relocate due to being in earthquake-prone buildings. They should be allowed to relocate. Some venues are in dangerous buildings or in sanitary buildings. Importantly, if you were to prohibit relocation, that does not necessarily mean that we will see fewer machines. It just simply entrenches venues in their current locations, which may not be the most desirable location to have them. Next slide talks about the rise of online gambling. That's huge at the moment, with the government announcing that they will be licensing online providers in 2026. In February 2026, we'll have 15 online license providers. They'll be free to advertise and free to market in New Zealand. They are bound to be all offshore providers. There will be no tax. There'll be a tax take to New Zealand government, but there'll be no community return to the New Zealand community groups. So adopting a more restrictive policy is just going to simply accelerate that migration from the people that are playing in our physical venues, where 100% of the profits return to the community, to offshore online gambling. The next slide talks about how popular that is already. We have 27% of adults participating in some form of online gambling currently, with 19% of that group doing weekly, and that's going to grow significantly with the new licensing system coming into place in early 2026. And the last slide talks about how undesirable online gambling is. There's no local grants, and there's no local grants proposed under the new licensing system. There's no local employment. Currently, there's limited harm minimization regulations or controls. The prizes are extremely large. There's frequent inducements to gamble. You put $1,000 into your account, the online provider will match that with $1,000. Those sort of the large prizes that you see online and those inducements to gamble do not occur in our offering, in the physical offering. Thank you for that, and I welcome your questions.
Wonderful, thank you. I just wondered, the online gambling and that 27% figures, how much of that is made up by My Lotto platform, which people don't seem to view as gambling? That's nothing.
Yeah, so a large portion of that is with the My Lotto app. There was some figures that came out from Lotto just recently in relation to the submissions they made to the government on the proposed new online licenses. And they were indicating that 48% of their players are now participating via the online offering. So it just goes to show, as you know, my toddlers 10, 15 years ago could work an iPad before they could talk. That generation's growing up, and now the first thing they reach for is an online device to purchase and participate in an entertainment offering, including, you know, when they get old enough to gamble, as opposed to going to a physical store. So that migration is happening. And unfortunately, in our space, the online offering has no community return, no local grants, no local employment, and we would like to see that physical offering still being available, still being attractive, and still seeing that employment and those local grants being made.
Thank you very much. Question from Martin.
Jared, the 25% drop in venues, is it now stabilised?
Every quarter the stats come out, and every quarter we continue to see a drop. So the decline's still there. Has the decline slowed down? Probably not. No, if you look at the graph, it's still a regular, steady, continuous decline. And you've seen that locally as well. On slide 2, I showed you the graph for the last 10 years of your decline, and that's just a natural, steady, continuous decline as well. which again emphasises there's no need to introduce a sudden policy change, a sudden policy shift. Your current policy is working, it's reasonable.
Thank you. And a question from Neil.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. You said about the two clubs that we've got, Alexandra and Cromwell, and you said that the money all goes back to the clubs. Am I correct in saying they can choose to actually give it to other community groups as well? It doesn't have to go back to the clubs, is that correct?
That's right. So the club venues predominantly use the money to support their own club facilities, to provide support for their own adjuncts, but they're also free to make external community grants if they do. But when they do that, that is not included in the grant data that comes through and is published by the Department of Internal Affairs.
That's a pity. Right.
Did you want to make a comment on that, Sarah?
So I've only got experience with one of the two, but I know Town and Country and Cromwell are very prominently out there doing that, and second-hand funding for sports that you can go for two level funding. You can go directly to the Gaming Trust, and then they will also support, and they're really positive at that. So that's good community involvement as well at that level. So that money does get returned.
Thank you. Stu.
It's not only just 3 venues in Alexandra and Cromwell, there's gaming machines in the Ramsey line as well, just a part of Central Otago. We do the same.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jared. Next up, we have Ben Hodges from New Zealand Community Trust, I assume.
Hi there. I can be seen and heard.
You can.
Yep.
Hi, and again, I believe that there's someone helping at your end with there it is. Kia ora tātou. NCCT supports the retention of your current policy, which ensures your district continue to enjoy and benefit from Class 4 gambling. Sinking lids are ineffective tools to reduce problem gambling. As you can see on the slide, since 2003, many TLAs have adopted sinking lids, and there's been a 44% drop in game machines in that time. Now, the red line at the bottom shows the total prevalence of problem gambling, not just for pokies, but all forms of gambling. And in 2007, it was 0.4%, and it's a bit hard to see, but you jump to 2024, and the rate of problem gambling is barely different at 0.5%. So it's really clear that there is no correlation between sinking lid policies and harm reduction. Sinking lids may reduce expenditure, but that's not the same as reducing harm. But a sinking lid would eventually cancel out pokie grants, which in 2023 totaled more than $1 million in Central Otago. This funding helps employ not-for-profit personnel to do good things in your community, puts money into your economy when the grants are spent, and overall helps your community to be happier, healthier, and more connected. Pokie revenue also supports your hospitality sector to be sustainable. It funds the problem gambling levy and provides GST. So who or what would replace pokie funding if it were to disappear? Council is about the only realistic alternative. Just to contextualise it, to do so, you would need to replace that funding, you need to lift 24-25 rates by 2.5%, which I understand we're already up 21% on last year. Now, you may have wrongly heard that pokie spend is up. Expenditure is actually down in your region and elsewhere when adjusted for inflation, and it's down even more on a per capita basis when you factor in population growth. It's also misleading to say a sinking lid could take decades to have an effect, because it could just as equally have an almost immediate effect. It's really tough for hospitality at the moment. Make no mistake, the closure of just one struggling venue in your community would have a dramatic and material effect on the sum of grants being returned locally. Some people argue that Class 4 creates a flow of money from the poor to the rich, but that argument relies on a loose overlay of the deprivation index. I'll explain. Most gaming machine venues are in the centre of towns or cities across New Zealand. The centre of most towns measure high on the deprivation index, despite or perhaps because very few people actually live in those central locations. People that argue that most venues are in high debt communities are ignoring the common sense reality that town centre venues serve a wide cross section of the community. arguably, the smaller the community, the more unfair that interpretation is. Take the example of the funds pub charity raises at the Stadium Tavern in Alexander. Next slide, please. Have that next slide.
Yep.
Thank you. That venue is indexed as a high depth 7 location. Now, the Alexander ice skating, swimming and BMX clubs are all indexed in low depth 1 locations. So if pub charity used Stadium Tavern funds, pokey funds, to help those clubs, is that really a flow of money from the poor to the rich? With this kind of common sense, you can unpick this poor to rich argument right across the country. About 0.2% of adults have a serious problem with pokies. The inverse of that stat is that 99.8% do not. Compare that to the 2% of adults who are alcoholics. That's 10 times more people than are addicted to pokies. 20 times more adults are morbidly obese. Double the number of Kiwis are addicted to exercise. These things can cause serious harm, but I don't think you'd advocate to adopt a sinking lid for pubs, fast food and exercise. It would be an ineffective harm min strategy, and it would be depressing for the 96 to 99% of people that aren't afflicted by those problems to watch their hospitality, comfort food and exercise options diminishing to zero. A sinking lid policy for pokies is even more indiscriminate. Remember, 99.8% of people are not addicted to pokies, and sinking lids don't have an effect on reducing problem gambling. But whilst only a small percentage of adults are problem poker gamblers, we mustn't ignore their suffering, and we don't. Pokie trusts provide more than $10 million per annum to fund and resource a nationwide network of problem gambling services. Additionally, we NZCT spend $650,000 a year on harm minimisation training, resources and technology. Finally, there is zero evidence to support the belief that problem gambling causes other negative behaviours like crime, violence or drug abuse. Yes, problem gambling can cluster with those things, but rather than being the cause, it's much more likely that problem gambling is just one expression of a complex web of mental health issues a person is suffering from. Gambling has been around for millennia in fact, and it will never go away, but you can control it, divert some gambling spend to help those that are addicted, and harness that human desire to gamble for community good. That's what the Class 4 gambling model provides. So NZCT encourages you to roll over your current policy for the good of your community. And just as a final slide, there's a few organisations in your community that have benefited from Class 4 funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions for the? No? Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now move to Charles.
Is here and college principal also from the same organisation.
Sorry, Charles has a colleague with him.
Yeah.
Marvelous. Welcome.
Thank you. Just wondering if I'm able to share my screen, please.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, just confirming that you can see my screen.
Yep.
Yes, we can now. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Dr. Charles Aguba, and I'm here today with my colleague, Paris Colette, and we're here representing PGF Services. PGF Services provides both clinical and public health services nationwide. And as part of our public health work, we advocate for the development of public policy that contributes to the prevention and minimization of gambling-related harms. And this includes working with territorial local authorities to encourage the adoption of policies that address community concerns regarding the density and locality of gambling venues, and in this case, a sinking lead policy. So just want to share some information around stats and data, but I also would just like to mention that it would be helpful for when people share some data and stats that they actually show or talk about the sources of those data, because it helps to, clean out any potential conflict of interest. But the evidence showed that a sinking lead policy is one of the best policies available that take on a public health approach to reduce gambling losses and harm from Class 4 gambling. Therefore, we support the Council's proposal to adopt a sinking lead policy for Class 4 gambling and TAB venues with no relocations allowed. Not allowing for relocations strengthens a sinking lead policy approach by making it harder for venues to move around the community, limiting access to harmful products. PGF is encouraged that the policy is being considered by the Council. By adopting this policy, the Council would take an important step towards minimizing gambling-related harm and demonstrates its commitment to the well-being of its community. I'd like to commend the Central Otago District Council's policy team on their work and fully support their recommendation to adopt a sinking lead policy. Our submission is evidence-based and founded on what is already known about gambling harm across New Zealand and beyond. Pokies are the most harmful form of gambling in New Zealand. They are highly addictive and specifically designed to be very absorbing. Most of our targets of our route as clients who are presenting to our gambling support services for clinical intervention are always doing this because of their participation in non-casino pokies in pubs and clubs, more than any other mode of gambling. While most New Zealanders gamble without experiencing any apparent harm, a significant amount do experience harm from their gambling, including negative impacts on their own and the lives of others. It should also be noted that nearly 50% of all gambling harm is experienced by people who participate in low-risk gambling, and this have damages to their relationships, causes emotional distress, financial impact, and disruptions to their work or study. This suggests that we need to take a structural health promotion approach, focusing on reducing gambling harm at the whole of population level. In financial terms, as at 2023-2024, total expenditure, which is the losses or the amount remaining after deducting prices and payout from turnover across the three main forms of gambling, that's Class 4 electronic gaming machines, Lotto, TAB, and casino, was more than 2.7 billion, and this amount is increasing yearly in New Zealand. And of this amount, nearly half of that, which is around 1.055 billion, comes from pokies. It's also worthy to note that around 50% of pokies are located in areas of high deprivation. This means that people who are losing these monies are those that can least afford to lose them. And it's also good to worthy to note that we just need to stop taxing the misery of people. And if we just feel that the only way to fund clubs or pubs or any other ventures is through taxing the misery of people, then we need to think about better ways to protect them. Together with the Council, we will continue to work in helping to shape a flourishing community for all in Central Otago District and New Zealand. And so I just want to thank the Council for this opportunity and urge them to adopt the sinking lead policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huber. do you have any questions, Tracy?
Yeah, you mentioned that you think it's the most harmful form of gambling. What's your thoughts then on online gambling, which is completely unregulated and what
Yes.
I previously said? So.
Yeah, I think it's every form of gambling that harms any of our population is definitely harmful. However, we are looking at what we currently have in terms of the data. Online gambling today is not regulated, and it begs for a review of our current acts around gambling. But then what we see also with the argument from the government is that the introduction of that or opening that online space will provide the government an opportunity to actually regulate that sector. And so it means that what the government is looking at, why for us, we do not see that addition as helpful at all for New Zealand. But the government is saying that it will also give them opportunity to regulate that space, which is currently, because all the losses that we are talking about today, the 2.7 billion, the 1.055 billion from pokies alone, is outside the online space. We do not know what is happening in that space. So the government is arguing that that is also an opportunity for them to regulate that space, because you cannot tax what you don't regulate. And so we recognize that that is also a concern, but then the government is arguing that that's also an opportunity for them to regulate it. But what we know right now, the current data shows that people are actually struggling with addiction to gambling, and most of that is from pokies, from non-casino casino gambling. And so we need to deal with what we currently have on ground right now.
On that, I just wondered, PGF services are funded by the gambling levy and contracted it by Te Whatu Ora to provide public health and clinical services. What services do you have available in person in Central Otago?
Kia ora. It seems Charles has disappeared.
All right.
So nice to meet you all. We have a counsellor available in Central Otago who is based in Dunedin. So yeah, she's able to meet that need in person, processing not only counselling but things like multi-venue exclusions, which is where people exclude themselves from pokie venues. We also have a range of services available online to meet those needs, so by phone, text and email and video call. But yes, we do currently just have that one staff member in Central Otago, but also our broader team across the motu. We like to travel as much as we can to meet needs.
Yeah, how much time does she spend in any given month in Central Otago?
She's for full-time permanent staff in Central Otago.
But is she actually, if she is only available via phone and they phone her in Dunedin, or she
Face to
actually
face.
is she? I'm just not sure how she can be a full-time staff member in Central Otago if she lives in Dunedin. Do you have any facilities where people, like an office space in Central Otago, where people can access support face to face?
Charles, do you have an understanding?
No, I don't. But it also begs for the challenges around funding for organizations like us providing such services. And I can share with you some of the funding model around, the different organizations involved in the gambling sector, and just less than 1% of this or from the gambling levy comes to organizations like us. So we're very tight in terms of having resources, and so we need to look for every other public health measures that will help protect our community, because we are struggling in terms of having the full resources to really do our, and of course we know that the other players in the game have so much that they can leverage from, but we do not have that opportunities. And so we're doing our best and making sure that both physically and having our presence online, we are available to do that.
Thank you. Matt.
Previous submitters have shown that a sinking lid policy has had no direct impact on the numbers of problem
problem gamblers is basically stayed at around the same level over a long period of time when the number of poker machines across the country have diminished. Would you like to comment on that, please?
Well, I think that is why I did mention earlier that it's really important that when we actually claim data or stats, that we're actually saying where those stats come from, because it helps to clarify any atom of conflicts that might be involved in those stats. New Zealand-based research by the University of Auckland University of Technology clearly shows that sink and lead policy will have a direct effect in terms of the reduction in expenditure, and of course, expenditure from the gamblers have direct impact on their well-being. It will reduce that number by 13%. That is a New Zealand-based research. Also, a 2017 research by the Ministry of Health actually outlined, because earlier one of the gambling organization rep talked about the link with other comorbidities. It actually showed that that gambling harm is 2 times more harmful than every other non-communicable diseases. So these are stats that are not just available there, but they are New Zealand based, and I'm giving you the sources of those stats. So it's really important that we actually state clearly, for the sake of clarity and for the sake of sharing any conflicts of interest, where our data are coming from.
Yeah, and I completely understand that. And while it's nice to take a nationwide lens across the challenge, we are concerned today with the people of Central Otago and what we can control within this sphere of our boundaries. So thank you both for your time. That is much appreciated. Next up, Richard Kinley, who I suspect is from the Otago Rugby Football Union, but I'm just looking at the acronym letters and saying what I think. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you. Firstly, a couple of apologies from me. I did want to be there in person. Just today hasn't allowed that, unfortunately. And also apologies for not joining a little bit earlier. I missed the start of Jared's submission and caught the end of that, and then the start of Ben's and the rest since. My role here at Otago Rugby is I'm the Chief Executive Officer. I've been here now around 12 years. Prior to that, I was at Sport Otago for 15 years. So I think whilst I'm wearing a rugby hat today, I do have some experience from a wider sporting environment, and I am not in a position or qualified to talk about some of the areas that Ben, Jared and Charles have covered. My submission today is to talk about the contribution to the community that I have seen firsthand and that we experience as a result of money going back into the community. We have a philosophy and a policy at Otago Rugby that we do not want cost to be a barrier to children to participate in sport, and we do not charge affiliation fees to children to play rugby across the entire Otago region, which includes Central Otago. Our only affiliation fees we charge are to senior teams, and we want children playing sport, and if that's rugby, that's great. And if it's football, if it's cricket, doesn't. We want children to play sport. We don't want cost to be a barrier, and we know that the increasing costs is making it challenging for some families to have their children play sport. So that was the first point I'd like to make. The second one is that we have been a recipient of gaming funding, obviously, for a number of years, and that is it forms a critical part of our ability to deliver community rugby right across the Otago region. We have a very close association with the Otago Country Rugby Board. They are an affiliated sub body of the Otago Rugby Football Union, and they play a critical role in providing opportunities for our young boys and girls to be the best that they can be. And an important part that organisation runs is the Otago Country Rugby Representative Program, which starts at under 16s upwards, boys and girls. We also run some development programs and skill development for 12 to 14-year-olds. So the contribution that we get from gaming funding allows us to fund those programs and continue to fund those programs. And you'll know this, but the other point that I'd make is any funding we get from from gaming funding has to go back to community orientated programs. So there is none of that money goes into high performance or any of our other non-community programs. So I suppose my concern would be a sinking lid policy in a region that population is growing would seem counterproductive in some ways, and the other people have spoken about the other aspects of gaming in your area. That would probably be just from a participant or a recipient perspective where we see gaming funding.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Richard. Any questions at this point? Jason?
Yeah, Richard, just wondering if that funding from that one entity was not available to you, would that essentially derail the community work that you're doing? Or would you be able to find the money from elsewhere?
Yeah, so everyone will know that the pressure that everyone's under. Not-for-profits are no different. It's been publicised recently how New Zealand Rugby's financial results are going, which directly affects us as provincial unions, because we get core funding from New Zealand Rugby. We, as a union, receive the lowest amount of Class 4 gaming across all 14 NPC provincial unions in the country. However, it does play a critical role in us being able to deliver the community programs that we deliver. So if that funding was to drop significantly, it would result in a reassessment of program delivery, which would be the last thing we'd like to do, but you would have no choice otherwise to reassess how we structure our delivery and support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you.
Next. Thanks very much, Richard. Next, we move to Michael Beauchard from Te Whatu Ora, who is going to speak to all three of the policies before us.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Michael Beauchard tōku ingoa. I'm a public health medicine specialist. That's a doctor that's specialised in public health. I'm the medical officer of health, one of them for the Southern District. I'm employed by the National Public Health Service in southern part of Te Waipanamu, and we're part of Health New Zealand. I personally don't have a conflict of interest in this debate. I don't gain personally one way or the other from what decision the council makes, neither does the National Public Health Service or Health New Zealand. So our role, the National Public Health Service's role, is to protect and promote healthy communities and health equity across different population groups. We do this by addressing the determinants of health. And I want to make it clear that we strongly support the sinking lid policy, and we commend the council for putting that as the preferred option. I support all of the comments from Charles. I take my submission as read on this issue, and you will see that it references peer-reviewed published literature in medical journals. So health and well-being is affected by a wide range of factors beyond the health sector. We can't fix health problems by ambulances at the bottom of the cliff. We can't fix gambling harm by treating individual people. The literature is clear and the health view is also clear. This is not an issue of problematic people. It's an issue caused by problematic products. And you have to address the causes of problems, not the end results. You do both, but if you only focus on the individuals at the bottom of the cliff, you're not going to address the huge harm. Now, I want to address, I think to date, the debate has mostly been focused on one side. There are pros and cons. There is funding given to agencies, and that enables good work to be done. We have to admit that that is one side. That has a cost. You have to weigh that cost. And the cost, Charles has demonstrated the size of it, but others have minimised that harm. Charles also has nothing to gain personally from this. If you want to know the Ministry of Health's position, their executive summary of a document on this very topic, first sentence, gambling harm is a significant social and economic issue. Second sentence, about 1 in 5 people in New Zealand will experience harm in their lifetime due to their own or someone else's gambling. Charles has illustrated how big this problem is. It's estimated, and this is published, you can look at the references and check if you wish, that it causes 2 times the harm of osteoarthritis, 2.5 times the harm of diabetes. It's similar in order of magnitude to major depressive disorder and alcohol misuse and dependence. So when you're making your decisions, make sure you weigh up the burden of harm that gambling creates. It's also an inequitable burden. Māori are 3 times at risk of problem gambling. Pacific peoples, 2.5 times the risk. Those more socioeconomically deprived have a greater risk. And I agree with Charles, and this is in the evidence, this is published. Class 4 gambling creates the most harm in New Zealand compared to all other forms of gambling. Now, there's a reason why we're not going to beat this issue by focusing on individuals. And this is very simple medicine. But gambling, pokie machines are designed to tap into our dopamine channels that we all have. We're all vulnerable to these hits that gambling machines prey on. That's why we have to address the products, not the people. There's nothing wrong with our dopamine channels. It's just that they can be utilised by dangerous products. So the most effective response to gambling harm, as with most health issues, to be honest, is to address the upstream causes. We have to decrease access, because decreasing access does decrease harm. That's also in published literature, and you can check the references if you wish later. So that's why we do support a sinking lid. The evidence is there. And that's why this policy has health's strong support. I won't speak to hadn't intended to speak to the other areas of policy. I'll take that as read in the submission and happy to answer questions. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Michael. I just wanted to check. Submission says, point 3, NPHS is focused on the achievement of equitable health outcomes. I don't think anyone would suggest that there's anything equitable about health outcomes for people in Central Otago. And I think a lot of the literature that you referred to, and Dr. Charles referred to it in his as well, is the very close link between mental health and gambling and problem gambling addictions. And we are also incredibly poorly served for mental health services in our area. So my question to you is the same question to Charles. You've highlighted that this is a huge issue. What support services do you provide the people in this area? Because this is the only area we have a sphere of control over.
Kia ora, thank you for the question. Once again, I want to reiterate the point that you do not fix these problems, you do not fix gambling harm by treating people that have already fallen into the problem. You have to treat the cause. Now, I'm a public health medicine specialist. I'm not if that question you'll have to direct to other parts of the health system. So my role is in public health. That's a population level policy advice and interventions. It's not on delivery of mental health services, but that question is a valid question, and you could direct that question to mental health services within Te Whatu Ora.
Thank you. I could probably answer it for you. People here who are facing critical mental health challenges can receive no support in person or access anything within region. And unfortunately, it appears that that is the same outcome for our people at, from a very low level of problem gambling. We don't have a huge population here, and I don't disagree with you and Charles. Probably Class 4 gaming machines are harming our communities in New Zealand. But does that harm on a nationwide basis outweigh, as you say, weighing up the benefits for what is, we do have some deprived areas whereby the costs for children to attend organised sport would be insurmountable for some of our families, and the support that they get that's going to be a real challenge for us to weigh those two. On the one side, a relatively low level of problem gamblers, and compared to our population with very little to no support coming out of Te Whatu Ora for them, and on the other side, kids in sport. It's incredibly important to us at this table. Has anybody else got questions or comments?
Well, one thing I sort of struggle with is that our population is quite mobile, considering a lot of it is tourism and high class wealth travelling through our region who could be the gambling. We have no way we're working out whether they're problem gamblers or not. But the outside money gambling in our community, like every other town in New Zealand, has been put to good use. And they're going to come down. We have a sinking lid, and over time, if those facilities close out, we won't have funding for sports teams and kids' sports or kapa haka or community groups. So, I think we're going to be very, very careful.
Neil, did you have a question?
Yeah, probably picking up on the submissions we've received, and if you look at the pure numbers, which is not always a good guide, it's 11 each. But the question I've got, or 11 in favour, 11 not in favour. How important is the view of the people in the community itself? Like we've heard from the agencies, I fully expect that, and the positions that have been taken don't surprise me. But from a Health New Zealand perspective, how important do you think that view of the beneficiaries potentially, or the wider community is? Because they seem to be largely have been quite silent, and I just wonder if you've got any sort of insights into why that might be, and if it's an issue that we should be mindful of.
Thank you, Neil. I'm assuming that's a question to me, Neil.
Yeah. Sorry, Michael.
I think the views of the community are vitally important, and they also have. People need to be aware of the harm. There's no doubt, if you read the literature, the harm from gambling outweighs the grants. No doubt in my mind about that. It's just that the harm is less visible. If you speak with the agencies that deal with those people, you'll get that same response. So I do support any efforts for community input, and it's a known issue also in the literature right across New Zealand and the world that people are unaware of the magnitude of the harm. So that also has to be brought to the table. So there's a lot of literature about educating people, informing people of the size of the harm. You can't make an informed decision if you don't have all of that information. And yes, it is a challenge for funding. I don't deny that. And that's also documented in the literature. It's also documented in the literature that grants from pokie machines impede the innovation that is needed because it's there and it's easy. So there are other avenues, and that's the challenge. That's where people should be putting their attention.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. I guess I'll make an observation. To me, this sort of issue for communities is a little bit like something that we've had before, which is the debate about fluoride. There's no clear agreement amongst everybody about what you should and shouldn't do, which makes it really simple for us to make a decision, which we'll make. But that in mind, in Central Otago, do we actually have a greater level of harm than any other community, or is that not particularly relevant to your submission?
Well, I think if you take a look at the points that I've made today, the issue is not to do with particular people. The issue is that we all have a dopamine channel. We are all vulnerable. Sure, there'll be pockets of more harm,
Yeah.
And that's generally in lower socio-economic areas, Māori, Pacific peoples. That's what the evidence says. It'll be no different anywhere in the country. That will be uniform across the country. And so it will be a problem in Central Otago, just like everywhere else. And the harm will outweigh the grants that are coming back. It's just that the grants are easy to see and the harm is often in someone's home. And I disagree with some of the points that have been made by previous speakers. The evidence is clear that there is a link to crime, mental health. It's just mostly behind closed doors. Doesn't mean it's not there.
No, thank you. And I don't disagree with what you're saying. I understand that quite well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I just had one final question, recognising that you were speaking to all three, but taking the others as read. You do note that for the psychoactive substances policy, which you may not be able to stay with us for the whole time, that you recommend adding addiction centres as a sensitive site in the policy. If we add it, can we have one?
Fair point. I guess it's written in the same way that there are no current psychoactive substances. So you're putting in a policy to future-proof. So if you have an addiction centre in the future, then it will be covered by your policy. So I would read that as a future-proofing.
Yep, thank you very much. Thank you for your time on that. And then, as Neil pointed out, we hadn't heard a lot from actual people in our community, and David George is the next speaker. Welcome.
Kia ora, Judge. Yeah, I'm speaking from lived experience. And what I'll say first is, with sports teams and cultural groups, possibly over time, work that in, but they should start doing raffles themselves, running concerts with the kids and stuff like that. It would take a decade or so for people to get into their groove, but with a thinking with policy and behind that, they have to look at alternatives and maintain these sports and maintain these activities and build on them. That's my first point. I don't have I'm a trained community worker, but I have lived experience going back. I've been a member of Al-Anon family groups for 42 years, and I'm one of two senior people in the Lakes area that oversee these groups. Al-Anon's there to support the families of alcoholics. We have close ties to AA, obviously, and also with NA, Alcoholics Anonymous. We're very small, we're not very well. So what are we self-supporting? We don't have any fundraising outside of our own groups. So for that reason, we don't sort of have much of a profile. So this is why I just did in for that. We had rampant alcoholism in my family, not down and out. One was both the doctor and the other one was an engineer, local engineer. But I'm going to focus on the addiction side. It's my brother and sister. My brother I'll have to refer back to Queenstown Lakes because he was a casino patron, and his inheritance in about 5 weeks, and he lost that, and he lost his marriage and everything. My sister was a pokeraholic, and she's in Australia. I'm not sure if she still is. The thing is that you've got host responsibility, or you're supposed to have it, but they can just go from one location to another. And in the day, of course, they're just sucked to dry, basically. You look at the RSAs, the RSLs, and the chartered clubs. Many of these clubs wouldn't exist. They wouldn't survive without the room in the corner with the flashing lights and no windows and no clock. Yeah. They wouldn't survive, and I could name one, but I'm not. But definitely wouldn't. They wouldn't be goers. They wouldn't make it on the food and the catering at all. It's subsidised by the gaming. Yeah. My sister in the end, my two nephews lived we did our best with them, but left to eating dog food at one stage. And my nephew subsequently died of drug overdose. I'm not saying it was the dog food incident that did that, but it was symptomatic of what was happening in the family structure. It was awful. And of course, the services available, that's always something we've always fought up, and whether people can access people who are at the bottom of the heap in such a bad space, that is another thorny issue we have to consider. So having said that, thanks for the opportunity to speak. And I'd just like to say, yes, I'd like you to adopt a sinking lid policy. And as people fall out and no longer provide that form of entertainment, raffles, money going into lotto, which comes back into sport, that money will go somewhere. It has to go somewhere. Go somewhere where there's a bit more interaction, there's a bit more, few more people around, and there's a bit more interest and excitement. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Did anybody have any questions?
Yeah, if we took the single lid policy and we went down another 25% of the venues or the machines, and in our community, a lot of the younger ones are gambling online, whether it be sports betting or lotto or rugby results, and there's a push for betting on the TAB now and all sports fields and cricket. Will the problem of addictive gambling go away? And I sympathise with a friend exactly the same in Ranfilly whose husband's inheritance got lost, but when the care was put around this person, they shifted venue. But if they're online gambling at home, there would be no support. So I mean, I guess the question I'd have is, if we got rid of them altogether, would the problem go away? And my answer is probably no. And are we better off having some form of controls and having it looked at an outside in, and fixing harm if they can if it's safe?
Yeah, that's a good point. So in the international program, a problem to do all the service online, etc., all that sort of thing, and children especially is one of those big issues. And there's a huge lobby going in to protect, at least protect people under 18 from all the ills and evils of the internet, yeah, of course. And sooner than later they'll fix that, hopefully. Yeah, take your point though.
And to me, I just can't help thinking, you take Ranford, you have a large sharing population that comes through who are hitting that demographic. You might make $1,000 a day and put $50, $100 every night in the gaming machine to move away. And if we have a gold mine or an airport, whatever, it will be international tourists come here, that their money will be used to help our communities deal with victim issues with foreign income. That's it. It's a tricky decision for us.
I know we've got the motorsport park out of Cromwell, and they spend money on our local youth, and we've had a very serious accident. In fact, we've had a lot lately with young people especially, and they're providing specialised driving training because they've got the facilities, they've got the track, they provide that sort of thing. So there's also private sponsorship too. And especially around here, we've got millionaires up every gully, literally in Cromwell. And, we could just squeeze their pocket a little bit. Think about it, private funding. Thank
you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Alex and Lee, would you like to cover this one off first before we move to the next one?
Yes, we've got quite a bit to cover. So our job in a review such as this one is to try to find you the facts and the true pieces of information and what you need to know, and amongst a lot of partisan voices, and we're trying to put some transparency where there is opacity. And since we think we've done it okay, we think we have found some good options where there seem to be none. So to start with the facts, the form of gambling we're discussing is the most addictive form of gambling under New Zealand legislation. It has a unique categorisation. They got from 1 to 4. Casino nights sit at number 3. This one is at number 4 because it has been designed to light up the dopamine receptors in your brain and keep you addicted. The estimate from AUT referenced in the October 2024 agenda is that up to 40% of users of pokie machines are or will become addicted through the use of the machine over time. We have a significant lack of data on what that harm is doing within our community and a significant lack of interventions because of a significant lack of health services in the area. As we try to calculate those numbers best with the different agencies, we've extrapolated that it is likely sitting at around the same rate as the national average. We also, because of that shortage of data, pay particular concern to the social impact statement using the white paper from Te Whatuora Health Southern, Salvation Army and the Problem Gambling Foundation that call for an end on community sector dependence on pokie funding due to this disproportionate impact on people in poorer communities and on problem gamblers, a lack of surety in the funding and the lack of transparency in the grant process. The legislation requires us to pay particular concern to those items in the areas of highest deprivation, which for us are those areas in Ranfurly and the Stadium Tavern using the deprivation index. The landscape for gambling on kids is changing, and it's changing legally as well. And also our understanding of whether those addictions still or don't transfer has grown, as has the risk now of a lot of those cell phone games for children starting to pick up the same noisy sounds that are designed to hit the same dopamine receptors. The argument that was really persuasive at the last review feels a bit out of place now, and all we can say is that phone gambling is a potential parallel harm that we currently have no control over. We just need to wait and see what happens with that legislation. A sinking lid is a slow approach. The time it takes is indefinite. A license can exist in perpetuity if it continues to be renewed and continues to comply with the DIA. The only reason for funds, and also because the DIA at Clark's Lumley, a license can also lapse for up to 6 months, including through the sale of the business, and still be brought back into place. So the length of time we're talking on a sinking lid is not tomorrow, it's not short. And for all the reasons we've discussed today, if there was an option that shall be written off tomorrow, we wouldn't have brought it to you at the table. Now, the only reason for funding for community groups to be impacted is if the societies choose to do that. The amount of profit per gaming machine is a continuous rise in our district from the 2015 baseline to 2023 when they did the math, it had risen by 35%, and it's continuing to grow nationally. Nevertheless, there are community groups who are reliant on this funding, and we weren't able to find avenues to replace it. We spent quite a lot of time looking for other options, but simply the same way as a council, we're working through the impact of that high inflationary pressure. It's impacting funding, private philanthropy is down, and that which exists is existing mostly in the North Island. Applying to sinking lid may make the societies choose to provide less funding to Central Otago in the future. That would be a choice. However, retaining the status quo at the last review did result in relatively low returns, so the track record here isn't the best. The law requires that 40% of gaming machine profits are returned to the community by way of grants, but it is not ring-fenced by place. Of the 65 territorial authorities, at least 34 have a sinking lid policy. That gives us examples of what's happened to grant funding in the past. In Kawerau, they're receiving about 20% of the profit as a result. In Hauraki, 22% was received in 2023. In the Far North District, 15% was returned. On the other hand, Tauranga, Dunedin, and some of the bigger areas have not seen an impact on their grant funding at all. However, in comparison, Central Otago has averaged just 27.09% return in the years we have data available. In 2020 and 2021, the results were in the teens at 14.68% and 16.2%. Even if we assume that relates to COVID, in 2019, the rate of return was 28.7%. All of those figures have been adjusted in favour of the gaming societies. We pulled the original figures from government data, which were much, much lower, spoke with the New Zealand Community Trust and Mr. True for a gauge on why. And then we went away and we took the club funding factors and financial record from those two clubs in the district. We apportioned to allow for GST, and we sent an official information request to the DIA to check if there was any more funding available. So we are confident that that 28.7% figure is accurate. The only national comparison of gaming machine proceed distribution that we have access to came from Mr. True in the Gaming Machines Statistics Research paper, Information for Territorial Authorities. That graph reflected the Otago region as the third lowest in receipt of grants in relation to expenditure on gaming machines in 2019. We were also advised by the societies that the role of head offices meant spikes in Auckland or Wellington, but the gaming research paper didn't show this either. It reflected spikes in Southland, Hawke's Bay and Gisborne, and flattening in those town centre and major areas. In addition to those facts, we have a few values that we can fall back on. We pride ourselves here on our transparency, on maximising the funding available to us, about caring for our community, and e ora te tuatara ka patu ki waho, solving a problem by continuing to find solutions. So if we strip it back to these facts and values, the two options that sit above the others that put us in a position of strength in making this decision are: you can sit at the table and play your cards and gamble on a higher rate of return of those profits to the community. The societies who made those decisions are listening, quite literally on the phone right now. If you want something from them, this is your opportunity to ask for it. You could decide that sinking lid is such a long leash as to have a minimal impact on harm, and that you could do more in the interim by pushing for a higher level of funding. You could request either they or us as staff provide you with frequent updates on what that return is looking like, to ensure that you're happy that we are getting a result that is fair to the proportion of expenditure and balances those harms out better. We have options about what setting we leave the system at in the interim. We could leave it at the status quo, but then there's the possibility of a new machine emerging or a new venue setting up. We could hedge the bets a little by putting an absolute cap on the number of machines at its current level of 107 machines and wait to see what happens over a set period of time. We could temporarily put a sinking lid in place and review it in the future. All of those measures can be made as a minor tweak to one of the attached policies. Or you can decide that you don't want to gamble with the most vulnerable parts of the community. That we had this conversation with these organisations last time and didn't get the results that were expected or were promised. And there's a parallel there with the approach we've taken to smoking. Approximately half of all tobacco users die from a tobacco-related disease. Approximately 40% of all poker machine users become addicted. So just as the smoke-free settings work toward a future where no child picks up a cigarette, our sinking lid approach can set up a future of Central Otago where no child puts $1 in a poker machine. Yes, there are other forms of gambling and there are other forms of harm, but this is the one in front of us. This is the space where we can take action. There are those other options that I won't go into in detail of the relative cap, lobbying government, retaining flat status quo. The two approaches we feel lead to the best outcome here is that we either sit at the table and negotiate and gamble on increasing the amount of community good, or we walk away and gamble on reducing the amount of community harm. And with that, our review is complete and it's over to you to make your decisions.
Thank you, Alex. Wonderful.
Well done.
I have one question, Lee, please. How many of our current venues would potentially be captured under earthquake strengthening requirements?
Great question. I don't have the answer to that off the top of my head, unfortunately. That's because, well, at the moment, none are in the priority list.
Yeah.
Entirely calculated. So, if any are in our district affected by the earthquake strengthening, they would come to the requirement by being notified by the 1st of July 2027, and then they would have 25 years to run.
So the relocation argument is dead for water.
Well, kind of, although some of them are pretty old and crusty and might like to build new venues.
Yeah, we've got 2 in high deprivation areas, 5 in mid and 2 in low.
So you've got low deprivation, so Ranford is one of those?
Ranford is considered low, that's
On
likely
the
because
population or the users of the machines?
on the population,
On
on
the
the
total.
deprivation map, it's considered a 2 for the area that's located in, likely due
And the
to,
stadium tablets are low deprivation area,
correct,
but there's no houses.
correct.
It's all how you read it, don't it? Yeah, it's all how you enter it.
Those are all things I just looked at.
So that low deprivation doesn't include transient workforce.
No, the deprivation index is very difficult to.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm making, but it's completely the other way.
It doesn't appear to be a huge factor.
And the other question is, we're not really sure all the information, but the government said a mandate of 40% return. So we've got no way of checking whether that 40% return is returned back to the community.
Correct, and that's where it became repaid.
So you can set the regulations, but we don't monitor the regulations of the crowd.
We have to have no control over that either.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be ring fenced in relation to whether money is taken.
And it's
So that is
very hard to trace.
So it doesn't have to be ring fenced to where the money is put in. So we might spend $10 million in our community. It doesn't mean that we get 40% of that 10 million returned to our community.
So this must only relate to the gaming machine, correct? DIA, we used to have one that went it. So you'd have to do a report and that information had to be spent and shown that it was spent within your region where you're licensed.
By the society.
By the gaming.
By the gaming society. So they say that they try to allocate to place as much as possible.
But can we not make that the situation that's generated in the boundary central target must be spending there?
We don't have that capability. We have no control over it. You have very limited control in relation to gambling. You know, gambling, when we've had this conversation numerous times before since the introduction of the Gaming Act of gambling back in 2003, is, you know, it's always a motive. There's always the pros and cons in relation to that, basically. Or, you know, we often we have the almost equally split, and I think this time we've had equally split as well, of those that are for, that are in the industry, and those that are against, that are dealing with the harm as a result of the industry in that respect.
So
your challenges is balancing.
we have no way of realising how much has been reinvested back in the central target region because of mandatory internal affairs.
Granted.org.nz gives you what was there. So we took the total figures of the granted tool and we took them and compared them against the tool of the gaming regime profit that the DIA also published and calculated our first percentage. I believe that first percentage I calculated on that was 10%.
So they'll have that information on every gaming machine licence. We have that, and they're supposed to spend every 6 months or every year.
And it's the way it was stored and captured and how you can and can't access and analyse it.
Neil, did you have a question?
Yeah, excuse me. Thanks, Tama. Alex, if we were to adopt the sinking lid policy, or whatever policy you adopt, I assume that we can actually change it in the future as well. It's not that, you know, if for whatever reason the world changes, the circumstances change, we can make a change.
Correct. There's 2 ways that could happen. The first is it would come up in 3 years anyway, because every policy comes up against any member. But you could at any point request that I bring it back, and I would do so.
So on that basis, Neil, why don't we just stick with the status quo? Instead of changing the policies, what we've got.
That's an option, but equally my next question then is that do we have to have a sinking lid and a non-transfer, or can we have a transfer but no sinking lid?
You could have a sinking lid that allows for relocation of existing hubs, and we could even ring fence that as limited as an earthquake strengthening conditions if you wanted, or only to an area of higher different of the.
Which is the same as status quo.
And then status quo allows for more machines to more venues to pop up with more machines.
And I guess my issue with that is we're going to go through unprecedented growth in central targets you've seen before. And if our nomadic population, whatever it may be, whether it's in the gold mining industry or a tourist or whatever, if we want investment and capital investment and then funds out of that for district-wide purposes, we should, if they want to, I don't know if I want to build up a hotel or a complex in Bromwell or Terrace, and a part of that, we want to make sure that we are open to business of all types in central target. So by going in the sinking lid, it just takes away the avenue for foreign investment or investment in the future, in my mind.
It's that one renewable way, and this literature is a little bit sketchier, but also came from the AUT paper, that a lot of the money that goes into a pokie machine is from a sort of family who aren't saving that money, so it usually be spent in the local economy. So the argument that they were trying to make there, and Lee and I wanted more sources to this before we brought it to them, but their argument was that the dollars in the pokie machine are dollars that would be at the local shop or the local supermarket or in the local liquor store, and that we're moving money around, but we're not sure if we're moving it in the right way.
I get that, but I guess if we've got a gold mine coming down the road, we've got some 25-year-old making $200,000 a year that's lonely because his family live in Indonesia or live in Christchurch or live in Australia. They may wish to go down to a local pub and have a meal and tea for $500 or $2 in a pokie machine. We're taking the ability, because they may have come from Coolangatta, where they can do that as a part of their entertainment life.
We would be cycling approximately 10% of what they put into that machine into this process, and then the gaming societies would be deciding how to distribute it. So on our current net, 27% of that would be back into this.
Jared and Ben still listening on that.
There, yeah.
Oh, Neil, did you have another question?
Yeah, so just to try and find an option to take this forward is that we could choose to cap the number of machines in our current in the new policy. We could say we will cap the number of machines, and we would allow transfers. You did say yes to that. Is that, did I hear you right, Alex?
We could, well, you can do anything you want, but an option to you is to cap the number of machines, allow transfers as long as they didn't go to a lower deprivation area.
Yeah.
Some conditions around that. And then I would recommend that you ask Jared and Ben to return to you in 1 to 2 years' time to show if the rate of return to the local community had or had not improved.
And that would have been my suggestion as well, as if there is an enthusiasm to keep either the status quo or some form of status quo with the suggestions from Neil, whereby we may like to consider capping the number of machines or putting in some considerations around the ability of transfer of location. But this policy will come back to us in 3 years already for renewal. We've heard quite clearly from what is effectively two sides of the same coin. And the challenge that I have is that it should not have been this difficult for Alex to find the information on what is the good coming back to our community. And that would be my challenge for Jared and to Ben, is that it should not be hard for you to prove that there is community value coming from those machines that outweighs the harm. And the challenge to Te Whatu Ora and to the PGF is that show us that the harm is being addressed through public health services in our area. That is not a fun to someone in another location.
What I struggle with is if you accept the submissions that show there's no correlation at all between a decrease in the number of gaming machines and the percentage of people who are classified as addictive gamblers, and the submissions from the public health sector tried to infer that maybe there was conflict of interest, but no, they didn't actually challenge that data. And if there's no correlation between the number of addictive gamblers and even when you had a period when the number of gaming venues was reduced, then there's no argument that other than to support the status quo.
Would you like to move that?
I'm very good. I'll second that.
Hopefully that information has been taken on board. This will come back to this council to be reviewed. On that basis, all those in favour? Against?
Abstain. If I may, because Blossom Festival receives in excess of $20,000 annually from charities.
I think everyone sitting around this table would be involved in an entity that has had some benefit from it. So I think
Can you please note that Martin has abstained and that the class 4 gambling and board venue policy as status quo will continue for 3 years. Thank you for your work of that one. Alcohol restrictions.
And we're back to hearing before a meeting for this one. And this one was triggered just due to the review of the alcohol restrictions in public places bylaw. The existing bylaw was consulted on with 2 new areas of consideration and the inclusion of the Tibet Valley in the Blossom Festival temporary alcohol restriction zone and the inclusion of the Merino Shears weekend. Both staff and elected members were satisfied that Section 155 conditions were met, that there's sufficient evidence of the problem to be resolved and that a bylaw is the most appropriate way to do so. The special consultative procedure was followed and full details are attached in the report. 13 submissions were received in support of the proposed approach. 4 submissions were received against the proposed approach. All comments received are summarised and attached for you. You've heard from Michael and David in relation to this item, so we will now hand over to Senior Sergeant Reese Harper and Senior Sergeant Clint Knight.
Reese, you've had a promotion. And Sergeant Elder, welcome.
Morning. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Sergeant Adam Elder. I'm the rules that I've got your responsibility right here with the lab and Reese Harper and through that I've got officer involved. He's been here since 2019 for at least a few festivals, so there's sort of a unique understanding of the issue. So to clarify, the police submission is in relation to the liquor ban, not the Blossom Festival or the Merino Shears, which is our relevant events. The police have noticed a high level of alcohol in communities over the period that they've been run. And we acknowledge that elements of the community may find submission restrictive, but the overriding goal is to mitigate the level of harm caused by alcohol in communities. We aren't seeking a permanent liquor ban, we're seeking to extend the Blossom Festival liquor ban through to the Tibet Valley and to extend it over to the Shears weekend, which is February after. The photo booklets that I've just handed out show photos of some of the issues that we've faced over the last couple of years with the Blossom Festival and the Merino Shears. In relation to the Blossom Festival, we have a contingent of car enthusiasts, generally from Invercargill and Bulla and Canadian, travel through the Saturday Blossom Festival. A number of them complete what is what we're known as the mountain trail, where they travel through the Tibet Valley up from Queenstown back to Invercargill. We acknowledge that motor vehicles have a sober, fully licensed driver. However, this allows for passengers to consume large quantities of alcohol, which leads to antisocial behaviour. We do see an increase in alcohol harm over this period, which ranges in seriousness. From the past years, they tend to meet at Race Junction, stopping at Miller's Flat, Roxburgh Dam, and the rest areas of the Roxburgh Village. We have pockets of alcohol harm, we have pockets of alcohol-related harm as they travel through. There's always facilitate events and disruption in our rural communities. Last year in the Tibet Valley, we had issues in Miller's Flat at the Miller's Flat School with urination and disorder. To the extent that the local school down there had paid for and installed cameras leaving school. There was also issues with contingent congregating causing damage to the Miller's Flat cabin, which were closed. The contingent posed risk to other road users at Race Junction and Roxburgh Gorge, with participants standing on the road and drinking alcohol. There was also disruption to residents in Roxburgh and local businesses down there. A large number of contingent also parked the Roxburgh Dam and people traffic. We also had several serious incidents involving members of the contingent, which included an assault and threatening with a weapon and an arson of a vehicle at Race Junction. Until the contingent reached the boundaries of Alexandra and Cromwell, the police are limited in their enforcement of these groups. And we've noticed that in their behaviour as well. They just stop and consume a lot of alcohol and sort of they know that the police make it else wrong. Increase the liquor ban through the Tibet Valley will extend police's ability of enforcement and prevent harm as a group moves across that area. In terms of the Merino Shears, the main shearing event is held at the Stadium at Molyneux. It's a liquor licence that has its own security. In 2022, there were 4 prosecutions for drink drivers in vehicle impounds in a stolen vehicle at night. The
vehicle impounds and drunk drivers will look at being at the Golden Shears, so the Reno Shears. 2023, following the event, there were issues with patrons congregating the car park, which were not dispersed. There were multiple fights and disorder events. Police had from the skirmish line, patrons wouldn't move on. Police were greatly outnumbered and there was some confrontation involved in that. The nearby public toilets were also damaged and were required to stay. Police worked in partnership with the event organisers and stadium cabinet to mitigate the risks of future events, and there was certainly a room of improvement the year after. However, the last year there were still participants and attendees drinking vehicles in the car park. A lot of broken bikes and disorders throughout the day and night. These people would come and go every day from the venue and drinking alcohol in vehicles which were parked in the car park. In a nutshell, that's our submission. Our aim is to mitigate and reduce the harm caused by alcohol in our communities and our rural communities by extending the liquor ban. Police believe this will reduce the risk and harm we previously experienced.
Just carry on with that. First and foremost, I want to separate the Blossom Festival from this carry on. It's run very well, and over the years, incrementally, we have seen a better product from that. The marina should get similar. This expansion really provides with another tool to be able to move people on and enforce it. And part of the tactics with that would be bringing other staff in to be able to help with it. Somewhat challenging to do, but a really good important one. People really put it out on social media early. They know when they come down it's pretty hard already. We want to shift that down. They would be very good to be able to utilise. We have discretion. We always do have discretion on stuff, but they're already talking that they know that we're putting submissions in and thinking about how they're going to go and coming through. So we want to be able to make sure that we've got the tools to be able to carry on with the work we are doing in support and parallel with the Blossom Festival and all that stuff. So there are challenges with it, but I think that if we get the opportunity to have zones through there, then we can actually move people on quicker with other tactics as well with stakeholders that maybe trying to get to out of the gorge where it's very dangerous with all the cars. We're talking about Waters Creek actually, and other zones like that where they congregate and they urinate and they drink alcohol for long periods of time. We just want to keep them moving effectively and keep them filling out the area as quickly and efficiently as we can. And we believe this is the tool.
Just like to comment because I am in the Tibet Valley and I've seen it firsthand and it's very antisocial. I've had people urinating in my front property. I've got a property on the main street and it's quite intimidating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Martin.
I'm fully supportive of this policy. Having working with the police over many years around Blossom Festival, we have seen a significant decline in alcohol-related issues because of the tools which have been in the toolbox allowing the police to do their job. And what's been lacking in our policy is the following weekend and around Merino Shears and in relation to incidents in the Tibet Valley and Race Junction. So I totally concur with what Clint's saying. By giving the police these tools, we will see a decline in antisocial behaviour because it actually works really well. When I can go back to about a decade when the front page of the ODT said 85 people arrested for alcohol-related incidences with Blossom Festival. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. As the colleagues said, we don't have arrests around Blossom Festival with alcohol anymore.
Most of the work's been done though previously in the advertising and messaging. And I can see that being really important. Making sure it's at the root and if we can to the groups that they're not following and stuff. And it does work. It takes time sometimes, but it does work.
Yeah, well, I have no problem with that at all. Is there any risk that they're going to push to somewhere else and then we're going to be coming back with another area that we haven't even essentially assist people with?
It's hard to say. potentially that could happen, but it's, again, if we've got that tool in the toolbox, we can mitigate some of that risk, and if that is the case, then it's up to us to join, we'll get another way to police it.
To find out where
Yeah.
to go.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of, yeah.
Sorry. Anyone, people are smart, so they see something and they'll find a solution to how they're going to be, that they might decide to go around double.
Yeah.
That's hard to plan for, and we often think of intelligence, so you really can make plans, but if they, say for example, they move around the other ways through the plans, if they've got their own role when it comes to planning, it's the basic techniques to enforce that stuff. But the other look at the other areas and they're smart enough to go there. So that is a real advantage.
And I think there's a part of it too. We're not saying don't come.
Yeah.
It's great to get 6 of your mates or 5 of your mates and hop in a car and you're driving from Yea to Bay and round in a big circle. We have no problem with that so long as you have your sober driver. But don't stop and pee in front of Sally's house. Don't trash our public toilets that we then have to fix as a council that ratepayers are paying for. Don't cause such a scene that you're impeding on the lives of the people who are already living here and enjoying it. But by all means, come on through and stop on the main street and get some takeaways and carry on.
If I can talk about the amount of people who have expressed sadness at the lack of the car fanatics from lower South Island, I'm not going to it's quite common, you know, I get that comment, what's happened to them? And but you know, if that group decide to change their tactics, they are very good at using social media and telling their followers what they're doing, which is also means the police have a very good idea what they're doing too. So yeah.
But it's not like the day there's played by this year. And the tactics of we get to again. But as long as they tools that from kind of areas to know people on there, they drunk or something. And the tool around there to be able to lead in the force, which really helps us. So, and I don't find the same in the base.
I think it's a few things well, like the residents in Kenya to feel safe in their communities, and but Alexandra and Paul have the demand for, so yeah, getting close. So
yeah.
Does it mean that liquor stores are required to follow the restriction periods?
No. All the regulations and laws around supply and sale of alcohol still apply. I mean, part of the objective is to go from a product and we make sure that drinks. You know, it drives them room to load up for the people that are intoxicated in the bag, saying they're still going to have obligations to be able to say to balance of alcohol. Again, we want to work with them and make sure it's done right, because we don't want to be that. We just want to done right.
Yeah, how can you, city can't possess alcohol? So how can you buy it from the store and carry it in the car?
Yeah, so the answer there, you can actually drive through and ensure we cannot stop and do laps. So you can possess, if given the opportunity, so you give them the opportunity to go directly through. Otherwise, people that are on a bag can walk from the supermarket home. That's a possession. They have to be given the opportunity to go home. That's fair and reasonable, and I want you to hate it, I'll start doing around with this. You're a position, you haven't given them the opportunity to go home, directly home with them. So that's the.
And that is in the policy, is that if you, for example, if you went to the supermarket and bought a box of beers, you can put it in your car and drive home. You cannot then have 4 mates in your car and drive around and around drinking the beers. So that is in the policy.
Don't crack one open on the way while you're moving. Has already
Right, on that, before we get too much further behind, I just wondered if that map perhaps of the Teviot Valley could be updated with a nice big red line through the whole thing to indicate where, so that it ties into the other maps. I also saw there were a couple of notes there that people wanted to around the permanent alcohol restriction, that it begins at 10 p.m. and finishes at 7 a.m. It does not prevent you from having a beer at the edge of the lake when you're sitting there having a barbecue with your family. So that's still going to be something that's open to you. And of course, the police do still use a substantial amount of discretion if it is 10:01 and you are still finishing your beer. So hopefully that will allay some of those people's fears.
shares. Just looking at that, I'm employing a lot of shares, been working with them and living with them in the community and going to the shares every night. It's probably one of the only events where they really have the thing. Can we, I don't like it, I know what happens, but can we make the car park smaller? You see item 13 and 14, they're just out along the front of the pub. And the car park probably is only metres off the front of the pub.
You give someone an inch and they'll take a mile.
I understand the group.
Experience going out again. I think we get reasonable. It's done really well.
Yeah.
Last year was really.
Is it, but is it too many people, I guess, for the venue as well? Is that another thing? It's education too.
Yeah, that's the.
Some of the groups are hard to educate.
Yeah, that's on every.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess, is the boundary, is the whole car park, I understand the whole car park, is there too many people kind of 11 o'clock when all comes up for the venue they're in? And could it be a barrier, well, actually, this is actually a bit of leeway, but there's this.
There'll be for the liquor license application where they let people.
Yeah, they can still do that.
But we don't have issues with alcohol consumption in the actual event. What we have issues with is people going to their vehicles and drinking throughout the day and coming back and forth. And that's where you get all the broken glass and the disorder and stuff on. And then if we let that slide during the day, when it does, they don't.
So what you're saying, if they apply for a liquor license at the hotel or even there and they had a defined area, they're in that defined area, maybe make everyone's job easier.
Yeah. Well, they have control of their
actions who's coming and going. Yeah.
We police the license, right? We like to think we police the license versus the rest of them, because that's where it all starts. So the boundary of the area we're talking about, probably outside of the license, eh?
Yeah.
Control of them leaving, but they don't care once their event's finished, what happens subsequently, and that's a problem. They should care, and so we should
probably there or not, they don't.
Yeah, and then the education should be all part of that license as well. The obligation, because if someone died and they pissed on their bed, that'd be your culprit, right?
We did do some work leading up to the ring issues last year. We spoke to Gavin McHale and Peter Lyon and just keeping their staff and stuff safe going to the event. So it's certainly not a criticism of all sharers, because people that leave the venue from great as well, but you get other people that might not have been involved in it turn up, and that's where we can get a bit messy. So it's just
there'd be people who wouldn't even be at the event, would be there's another reason.
Yeah.
That's pretty. I'm happy to move the recommendation.
We might hear from Alex first. This is to the end of the hearing. We're just doing a slightly convoluted part. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I really appreciate you taking the time to, if you'd like to stay in Henry's, then you can find out if it's going to be passed or not.
Oh, he does? Yeah.
Thanks very much.
There's one there
The report.
on the table.
In answer to Councillor Patterson's question, we have drawn this liquor line directly to the boundary. So if we are to pass the problem on, we'll be passing it on to a neighbour, which I was not intent to know. That just happened to be the location the police gave us. Are there any further questions?
Sorry, Brian.
Neil had a question.
Neil.
Yeah, thank you. Alex, in your report, you talk about the local alcohol policy, and you finished the discussion about that by saying that staff will explore the options further. If my memory serves me correctly, in the last 5 years, it said it may be more. We actually did start to consult and do some work on a local alcohol policy But because the courts were being overwhelmed with communities that were objecting left, right, and centre, we decided to take a step back and wait to see what happened rather than spend a whole lot of time and effort on something that would cost the community a whole lot of money. So I think as part of this, I'd like to think that we do ask to get an update of where that's got to and what those options are going forward, because I remember at the time it was something that was seen as being potentially helpful. But unfortunately, the litigious side of our communities made that problematic. So it would be well worth picking up, and I think that we should think about that going forward. But if you have any other comments about that, I'd be interested to hear them. Please.
Yeah, Neil, I'll step in and report to that one. So there have been a significant lot of changes in relation to local alcohol policies and that litigation that's actually happening to try and simplify the whole process so that the truth can be heard. Unfortunately, the way the legislation was set up was that, everyone lawyered up and came into quite an intimidating environment and challenged every single point that was going to have a benefit to our local community. A lot of those things have been gone through the courts, and so what I'll do is I'll bring out a bit of a workshop to yourselves in the future to talk through what that looks like, and then to discuss whether or not we do actually need to look at a local alcohol policy. Some might say that yes, it's the right way to go, but there could be unintended consequences from yourselves that you just need to have all of the facts of what that would look like for our community, basically, and whether or not there is a true need for us to continue down that path. So I will do a workshop in the future with regards to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions, or otherwise, did you want to continue to move that, Nathan? Martin will move that. Thank you. Sarah will second it. All those in favour?
But do we need to make some changes to maps or something, or because it should it refer to the attached policy or something like that? Because it just says adopt an alcohol policy. I don't think it's sort of.
The maps form part of that policy, don't they?
It just says B says adopts the alcohol restrictions in public places bylaw. That being which one? The revised one or something.
Part of that policy, so it does include the maps. I believe there is a line in the bylaw that takes care of that for us.
Okay.
But happy for you to say and associated maps if it.
Oh no, I'm more concerned whether B was because we did have a previous version from last time, so it talks about the bylaw. It should not say as attached or something.
I think was that the other policy.
We could just say in appendix 2.
Yeah, just so it's quite clear what we're adopting, because otherwise, this is our second crack, and which one are we talking about? I know it's obvious, but I think it'd just be important to make sure we get it right.
Would you like, so if we put at appendix 2?
Yep.
It is appendix 2, isn't it?
Appendix 2 and 3, which is specified.
2 and 3, yeah.
2 and 3, yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Are you happy with those amendments, Martin and Sarah? Yep. Thank you. All those in favour? Again. Carried. Wonderful, and I reckon we can still put in the psychoactive substances policy renewal. Yeah, still goes through this one now.
Same process, but we've heard the portion in hearing. We had 12 respondents on the psychoactive substances portion of the consultation questionnaire. 11 were in support, 1 was unsure. The one who was unsure wanted access to psychedelics for elderly people, so it was outside of the scope. So we're calling it fairly broad support.
Was that Nigel?
One change was made to the policy as a result of feedback. That is the inclusion of theoretical addiction centres for the theoretical drug policy. It's ready to hand back to you to consider.
Wonderful. Thank you. And there was also, I guess, the possibility that we not have a policy, given that there are currently no substances available that would fall under this. What are the benefits of having a policy that is not actually serving a purpose at the moment versus reassessing if something were to be made available to the market?
It really pulled out flat even if we didn't have one already. We would say it's not worth creating one. As we have one and it's taking this much effort to roll over, it will save the time in the future. But you're very welcome to go either way.
I'll just ask the other account. It's the same that, it is unlikely that, when this legislation came in, there's a lot of substances that they're just chemicals. And so as a chemical was produced and that went on sale, and let's say it's chemical ABC 123, that then through the agency, which is the government body, looked at it and said, no, we can't sell that. It's too harmful to us. We can take that. It was changed to ABC 123.1, 0.2, 0.3, and we were chasing our tails. And the legislation is amended in relation to that. I think having the policy is that future-proofing that we talked about and we heard from Mr. Meadows earlier. The second thing that I think it also does, it sends a message to our community in relation to, we don't want these substances in our community. Whilst we might have the level of growth that we're talking about, there's certain things that we don't want to grow in our community, I would argue, in relation to the harm that would absolutely bring to our community from that point of view. So I think it's the message of us sending in a positive way of say that you're not saying that you can't have it, but it's limited in relation to where you could have it, should this be a substance that is legalised in the future.
I think that covers that. Yep. On that basis, I'm happy to move that we receive the report, accept the level of significance, and adopt the psychoactive taxes policy. Sally is happy to second that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Yes, let's have Gordy, because that ties into this whole thing. Freedom camping enforcement options. Welcome, Gordy and David.
It must be quite hard.
Thanks. Here we go. Yeah. Thanks. So I think this is the third report I've done on freedom camping over the last 3 years that we've been looking at monitoring with the negative effects of camping that have been in the district. And I guess it's fair to say that in the report that we haven't had any of note that we've had to deal with, and it's got at least over the last couple of years than it was, say, 5 or 6 years ago, due to I guess changes in the law and changes in how Linda managing their sites around Lake Huntston. I guess the only rider I put on that everybody at the moment didn't decide to change their camping process, so that allows freedom camping for that camp with bandwidth that aren't registered as with toilets, then that might spread the issue around the district. And there are a number of implementations of this that council can do under existing acts. Like we can find people who aren't registered or self-contained with the right certificate. And I should add that just having a new read sticker on the back of your van does not make you a self-contained registered person. You need a registered thing like a little warrant card that people get in the car. So somebody has been busy around and bring stickers on all these things that aren't actually required. But the government and its wisdom has extended that out for local, or I guess privately owned vehicles, so that you don't need a self-contained registered sticker until you're another 12 months. So it was going to be this July, it's going to be next July now. That extended that out. So I guess I'm suggesting that we don't have a freedom camping bylaw as such, but we are probably better off having a review of our roading bylaw when that comes up, and having camping issues in there so that you can't camp on streets or get in trouble with those actually, but not many. And also, if we implement a parks and reserves bylaw, we can also use that to move campers on, and also for other issues we can get parks and reserves such as parking, encroaching, and all those other issues that we can deal with from time to time. Will make it a lot easier for us to enforce those issues. So yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Bobby. Questions, Sally?
I just have one question on the example bylaw on page 192 of our agenda, and it said these bylaws after, and then it's got in brackets the name of the reserve bylaw the year was made. Would we have a bylaw for each reserve then, or would they all get lumped into the one?
We would probably just
all that is applied to. So we're very clear.
Yeah.
And we have a list of that.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, we generally apply to all of them, but I think we would probably be, if there an appendix at the end saying replies to all these and.
Yeah.
Let's just think about that fact. I think when we get a new reserve, then it's transferred, so think about how an easier process for that. Might be just an amendment, sorry.
Yeah, Tracy. Yeah, just the financial considerations. The balance of the grant needing to be paid back. Is there going to be anything that is required to be paid back?
We will need to pay the whole amount.
The whole.
Because that was for freedom camping money only, and we have been holding that in reserve anyway, so it's.
Okay.
And any, I would notice during the, well, reserves by law, we would cover ourselves. Which I don't imagine, I think we just answer a couple of items. It's a hearing, council, advertising.
Just wondered so last summer, between November and March, we'd received just 13 service requests concerning freedom camping. Only 4 of them were related to CODC. Was that for designated camping areas or something else?
Our ones?
Yeah.
No, there was, I think they're on streets. Some was on, one was on a road, a street, maybe 2, and some were related to, over here, I think.
Sorry, just one other point, just on the actually I had some people a lady in my shop last week who, is it Jack's Inlet? Is that a Lynn's? Jackson's Inlet. So she actually got stuck. So she started going down there and she got stuck at the bottom, and another guy had to help her get back out, and the other guy didn't know how he was going to get back out either. So I did put in a service request to council because I wasn't sure who to contact at Lynn's. So then someone from Lynn's has subsequently got hold of me, and I just kind of copied and pasted the information I had from online. But it's, you know, it's probably a little bit of a concern because they all thought that it was a council reserve as well. But yeah, and I think once you get committed to going down there, there's kind of no way out, like you're committed, and then you're stuck at the bottom.
It's in our time, I think once you get down.
Yeah. Yeah, but then you can't get back out.
No.
Yeah, she thought she was going to have to ring AA to get out. Yeah. Would have better.
Google Maps.
Staff have been working quite closely with Lynn's on this. And I know Lynn's making a call. So the companies came here and presented much a little while ago, just on, I guess, some of the things that they're doing up and down the lake, and Lake Dunson is well known at Lynn's as being one of the noisiest lakes in New Zealand when it comes to freedom camping. So they are working through a couple of things about signage and stuff as well. But also if you drive up and down the lake, you can see there's some people that make their own tracks in, and I've heard of a couple of people getting stuck where they've tried to do the best themselves. So yeah, just on that, we've got a service request. We do have a relationship with that. If it does come through to us, the team will see the through to us, and hopefully that works there. So, yeah.
And the only other question I had, page 193, which is the draft kind of potential bylaw, the template one rather. Do people need to be specified as a ranger?
Yes, yeah.
It's quite a fun job. I feel like you get some walk socks and a picnic blanket.
Livestock ranger.
That could be a fly. Yeah, it could be a side hustle. Need a hat. Perfect. When would we anticipate seeing that back? If that was to be the preferred.
Yeah, maybe hopefully for summer, well, for the election process, everything looks like it down a little bit, so.
Yeah.
Probably maybe in the new year, probably more realistic.
On that basis, the recommendations A to D receives the report and accepts the level of significance. It agrees not to develop a freedom camping bylaw, but to develop a bylaw under the Reserves Act. Notes that any freedom camping enforcement actions required will be undertaken using existing legislation and authorises the Chief Executive Officer to do all that is necessary to give effect to this resolution. Do we need to have a comment in there around acknowledges that the money provided to develop a freedom camping bylaw would have to be returned, or does that fall under an operational, you just have to do that?
I sort of made that one a bit as well after that was because we not develop a money to do with that. So the other thing I thought didn't want mentioning about rolling, but I thought that this is something that happened.
Perfect. Someone happy to move those? Thank you, Lindley. I seconded. Thank you, Cheryl. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Good to have those squared away. And I know Tim always noted he was quite pleased with how few complaints there are, touch wood, compared to in comparison previous years. And I love that every day is a school day. And now every time I see one of those stupid green stickers, I'm going to say, ha ha, it means nothing.
As long as you're wearing your Rangers badge.
As long as I feel like the Ranger is going to have a specific hat.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Right, we will, if you've got the live stream, we will head to lunch. Hope you've got a lovely lunch prepared, Neil, for yourself. And we will be back here at 1:10 past 1.
Thank you.